something dumb before you die. Nobility are famous for no reason. Marie Antoinette enjoyed her cake. She caused a revolution when she would not share, and her husband lost his head for that mistake. The Hindenburg was a giant zeppelin. Its makers made a minor oversight. Before they filled it up with explosive gas, they should have fixed the no-smoking light. 'Cause history is made by stupid people. Clever people wouldn't even try. If you want a place in the history books, then do something dumb before you die. Tally-ho, tally-ho, our king and country's honor we will save. Tally-ho, tally-ho, we're marching into history and the grave. So if your son and daughter seem too lazy, sitting there watching bad TV, just remember you should be quite grateful. At least they are not making history. 'Cause history is made by stupid people. Clever people wouldn't even try. If you want a place in the history books, then do something dumb before you die. Do something dumb before you die. Do something dumb before you die.
And joining me now is the director of Stupidity, Albert Nirenberg. Hi, Albert.
Hi.
Tell me how you got the idea of making a film about such a nebulous concept called stupidity.
There's sort of a short answer and a long answer. The long answer is that over the last few years when I worked as a reporter, I started to notice a bizarre trend that I became curious about, which is that every news organization I worked for, and this is newspapers or TV stations, that I would always get a lecture at some point where somebody would say, you got to think of your audience as being 10 years old or 12 years old. Essentially they were saying, think of your audience as being like semi-illiterate morons. And I became fascinated with that attitude, and I wanted to know why that existed, because it was clear to me that the media saw its audience, in some cases, as being dumb. So later on, when I actually saw a film about intelligence that was fairly well funded, and it was a perfectly good documentary, I just became aware of how boring it was. It was just intelligence for some reason is just boring. And I was there and I was looking at the film and I thought, you know what? Stupidity is a much more interesting topic, and that's exactly where I got the idea. And I never really thought it would get the green light. And you know, and when I suggested to people, they didn't think it was a realistic idea for a film.
Why not? It sounds fascinating. Stupidity.
I think
what is it?
I think the reason why it's never been done, for example, it's never been done. The reason we can call our film Stupidity is because no one ever called the film Stupidity. And it's an idea that sort of flies below the radar. People see stupidity as a kind of like the pedestrian reality of life, you know, that you know, once in a while you trip, you burp, you say the wrong thing, and it's not the issue. And I've started to think that, you know, in the problems with human relations, that actually the little dumb things we do in life are sometimes really the issue. And so that's why probably people didn't think it was a real film idea. And I, like many other people, discovered in making the film that there really is an issue here. But I didn't know that at first.
It's a very complex issue, though,
Yes.
isn't it? And did you set out to make a very complex film? In a sense, you've got a lot of experts, you've done a lot of research. How do you convey something that really doesn't have any boundaries?
That is exactly, you put your finger on like the challenge of this film. I mean, when I realized that essentially this is the first film of its kind on the subject, that was a terrible pressure, because I felt like, you know, this is sort of going to set the tone and for other films, and for that reason I think I really cast the net wide, because I felt there's so many issues that need to be covered, and there's so many directions that need to be sort of, or questions that need to be opened up. And I found that to be the hardest part. You know, where do you start and where do you finish? And you know, that's why the film emphasizes things like the lack of effort that the academic community has put into looking into the issue, because that's the first problem. The second problem is that I think that we live in a culture that actually both admires and supports certain forms of stupidity. And
Which you call willful stupidity.
Yes. There's a trend in our times towards deliberate, willful stupidity. I found that to be like I think that's a critical issue for the survival of mankind, and that is, in the film. It's not the only thing in the film, but it's in the film.
So do you think that when people see Stupidity, your film, they're suddenly going to say, okay, I'm going to stop being stupid now? Are you going to change the world?
No, exactly. No, I don't think that's the goal of the film, but it did that to me in the sense that that's exactly what it did to me. Because as somebody who was in the media, who practiced the high art of dumbing down, I started to realize after a while that I was succeeding. I was not only dumbing down my audience, I was dumbing myself down. I was removing, big words from my vocabulary. I was talking in cartoons. They tell you, use word pictures. Only use one verb in every sentence. Don't use complicated words. Those are all things you're taught when you write for newspapers or for even television. It's even more extreme. After a while, you start writing essentially for 10-year-olds, and you start becoming mentally a 10-year-old.
Okay, but Albert, I gotta say this. When I watched Stupidity, I thought the style, that kind of frenzied action, lots of corny jokes and whatever, isn't the style of your film about stupidity kind of like made for 10-year-olds?
That might be an obvious contradiction, but I don't think so. I don't think that things in themselves, like for example, fast cutting isn't itself by its very nature stupid.
Yeah, but people throwing up and bare asses and Clinton and Monica Lewinsky beneath him.
Yeah. Why is that there?
That's kind of like goofy juvenile stuff, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I don't agree with you. I think the reason it's there, very simply, is because for Canadians it's a shock. They think that, what am I watching? But if you're an American, that's what's on TV a lot. And it has a lot to do with the Canadian-American thing. I mean, a lot of people said to me, oh my God, look at the things that are in your documentary. I was like, have you been watching TV lately? Because that's on mainstream television. And it may be just a shock of what's on TV, You've got some really heavy hitters here doing interviews and saying some really profound things. I mean, if you sit there and listen to what these guys are saying, it's very interesting in their concept of culture and stupidity within the culture. How did you rope so many big names, I suppose, into a film about stupidity, like Noam Chomsky, John Cleese, whatever? Those are big guys. I would say that in some cases we choose two tactics. One, a kind of aggressive tactic of really pursuing people in innovative ways. Like Bill Maher, we got him because we pinpointed his geographical location using satellite technology. No, not exactly, but we pinpointed where he would be at a certain time, where he was accessible, and then we knew if we hit him or his people with a good pitch that would be of interest to him, that he would respond. So we essentially got like a quick interview with him because he liked the idea. Noam Chomsky was roughly the same thing. I don't think he often gives interviews, but he was interested in the topic, and I think that it was just essentially well timed. There's a feeling out there that the issue of stupidity is sort of in the zeitgeist. Some people say it's because of the President of the United States. I think there's a web of reasons. And so it was just well timed, I think.
It's really ironic that when you went to Pamela Anderson, our favorite Canadian dumb blonde, she didn't want to be interviewed about stupidity. She refused.
Yes, we actually were thrown out of the hotel where she was speaking, even though there was no reason to think, we were not there in any kind of aggressive capacity. We're just, can we ask you a few questions? And I thought that was very funny because the idea of like, can we ask you a few questions about your apparent intelligence or stupidity? And the response was essentially to throw us out of the hotel. So kind of an interesting comment.
The use of political figures. You've got Clinton there, you've got Bush, obviously, as the moron of our times. Is that a dangerous thing to do? Are you ever worried that somebody's going to come after you and say, how dare you, that you'll be facing a libel suit?
Well, not from politicians, because there's not...
They're fair game, right?
Yeah, it's not that, and I don't think we go after individuals or, we don't call people stupid, so to speak. Politicians, I don't think it's like a libel suit. It's more in our times, people are worried that something's going to happen to you because you dare to attack these powerful people. And yes, I have a real fear of that. And I just decided, at some point in your life as a filmmaker or whatever you are, I just decided that if you walk around hiding or if you walk around living in fear, then you kind of will have a more fearful life. And I just thought it's better for my health that I do, say what I think and do what I think is right,